With Venezuela's ousted leader and his wife now pleading not guilty here in the U.S., his country's future remains uncertain. Maribel Gonzalez takes us through what's next with an acting president now sworn in.
Deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro was escorted by U.S. law enforcement back to a New York detention center after appearing in court along with his wife, Cecilia Flores. The two were arraigned Monday on federal drug and weapons charges following their capture during a U.S. military operation over the weekend. Maduro and Flores both pleading not guilty to all charges. Maduro stating in court he was kidnapped on Saturday and that he is still the president of Venezuela. President Donald Trump over the weekend saying otherwise and threatening to expand military operations beyond Venezuela into Colombia.
We're in charge.
Maduro's capture now raising questions as to what may happen next.
It's a great country that's been decimated by the Maduro regime. Nobody is disputing that. No one's also disputing the fact that the overwhelming majority of Americans do not support another failed foreign war.
Former Vice President and Maduro loyalist Delcy Rodríguez sworn in Monday as Venezuela's acting president. Monday evening, top U.S. officials briefed a select group of bipartisan lawmakers on Venezuela in a classified setting. This amidst growing concern from some members of Congress who say the military operation was illegal because it lacked congressional authorization. The House Speaker pushed back.
My appreciation of this entire thing is it was completely authorized by law. It's well within Article 2. And now we're getting our Article 1 briefing exactly on the timetable.
I'm Maribel Gonzalez reporting.